It's the middle of the week and time for Wednesday Reef. Our Wednesday reading learning goal is to analyze a complex set of ideas or sequence of events and explain how those specific individuals, ideas, or events interact and develop over the course of that particular text, whether that be fiction or nonfiction. At the end of today's lesson, you'll be asked to rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 4, a 4 being that you're able to bring together the ideas in terms of how they relate. This happens through connections made between ideas, people, or events. The conclusions you draw are logical and incorporate the ideas presented by the author. And finally, there is a meaning made in the sense that you apply the material to your own life. If you're at a 3, which is kind of where we want everyone to be by the end of these Wednesday readings, it means you're able to bring together ideas in terms of how they relate, and this happens through those connections made between ideas, people, or events, and the conclusions you draw are logical and incorporate the ideas presented by the author, but you might not be able to apply them to your own life. If you're at a 2, that means you're able to bring together the ideas in terms of how they relate, and this happens through those connections between ideas, people, and events, but you struggle to draw effective conclusions about the material. And if you're at a 1, that means that you can recognize the content in the material, but you struggle to see any relationships or draw any connections or draw any conclusions about them. So as you read today and complete this assignment, consider where you're at in your ability to accomplish that learning goal. All right, Wednesday reading, let's get to it. Today's articles are about the Great Barrier Reef and whether or not it's losing its coral. One of our main learning goals is to make inferences, which we'll do and we'll talk about. But I don't want you to focus on that in this sense. I don't want you to get so wrapped up in concerning yourself with your ability to make inferences that you miss the key part about reading nonfiction, which news articles are. They're nonfiction. And that key point is to question everything that you read. As you move out of school and into adulthood, reading isn't about, meeting benchmarks and identifying, learning goals. It's about becoming more knowledgeable and gaining an understanding of a topic. In this case, why the Great Barrier Reef is losing its coral and what climate change or global warming has to do with it. The author here is going to make a case. Both authors really are going to make a case. What I want you to do is ask a couple different questions. I want you to write 3 different questions that follow this format. If blank, then why blank? If this author says this, then why does this author say this? It'd be easier for me if I could learn to flee. But there's something holding on the way being long. Our article titles for this particular assignment are: Great Barrier Reef has lost half its coral since 1995. And the Australian Institute of Marine Science said the highest coral cover on the Great Barrier Reef in 36 years has been recorded. The first step to understanding an article and deciphering the author's main point is to analyze the title. To properly do this, I'll need you to make a prediction on what you're reading for each one now. Now, there are a couple of different items that I feel like you need to know in order to successfully read this. On the screen right now is a map of the Great Barrier Reef. You may not have known that the Great Barrier Reef is off the coast of Australia. In fact, if you can kind of see on the smaller picture in a picture there on the map that's on the screen where it is in Australia, kind of on that northeast side, that northeast corner. Um, and so it's kind of up over in that part of the world. And one of the things that each author is going to talk about is this concept of bleaching and what that means and what happens. The the idea of bleaching is on the screen now and kind of what happens. So you can read that. So now you've seen and you have at least a surface level understanding of what bleaching is and why it happens. So now it's important to take some time and learn about some certain vocabulary words that are necessary to help understand. I knew that bleaching was going to be one of those words, but there are six more that I'd like you to define. We're not going to go super in depth with these, but I would like you to define these words. So go ahead and look those up as they pop up on the screen. All right, and so now, off to the right in just a moment here, you are going to see the links to the PDFs of each article, right? So you're going to see Article 1 and Article 2. What I want you to do is to identify the author's main point and the evidence that the author uses to prove his or her point. Kind of like, okay, so I'm going to make this claim it's losing half its coral. Why do I think that? Point 1, point 2, point 3. How we know that the coral has recovered 2 years later. Here's point 1, point 2, point 3. And you should be citing quotes in the story. You should be citing evidence that the author used to prove their point. You should be pointing that out, saying this is why they think what they think. And so go ahead and do that now. And we are going to talk about that in just a moment. So take a look at this quote that I pulled from the 2020 article, the one that states that it has lost half its coral, has lost half of its coral since 1995, and it's under the heading "Australia's Great Barrier Reef has lost more than half its coral since 1995 due to the warmer seas driven by climate change," a study has found. Scientists found all types of corals have suffered a decline across the world's largest reef system. The steepest falls came after mass bleaching, and you remember from early in the video what bleaching is, events in 2016 and 17. More mass bleaching occurred this year. There's no time to lose. We must sharply decrease greenhouse gas emissions ASAP, the researchers said. A safe inference that maybe we could make off of that quote, because the author clearly used that evidence to say that the coral is disappearing. So a safe inference that we can make here is that 2 years later in 2022, if there's no time to lose, that the situation should be quite dire and that the coral reef should be, or the barrier reef should kind of be disappearing. But then we have from 2022, this piece of evidence that was used in the 2022 article. As the survey sums it up, A combination of a few acute stresses and lower accumulated heat stress in 2020 and 2022 compared to 16 and 17 has resulted in low coral mortality and has allowed coral cover to continue to increase in the northern and central GBR, Great Barrier Reef. So you would assume that 2 years down the road, things would be worse, right? If the situation is dire and there's no time to lose. So why is it rebounding? And if climate change is at fault, what does the growth of the reef say about that? So what I want you to do right now is write out 3 if-then statements and point out different pieces of evidence from each article that you found interesting. Maybe inconsistencies from each article that you found interesting. So go ahead and do that now. Write those. All right, we have 2 more tasks as we wrap up our assignment for today. I want you to find at least 2 more articles related to this topic. It can be on either side of it, whether it's losing its coral or it's sort of regained its coral. It doesn't matter to me what side you find the articles for. But what I want you to do is read 2 more articles and provide just a small piece of evidence from each one that either supports or contradicts what the articles say. So if you found one that was more in support of, hey, they seem to be rebounding, or more in support of, yeah, they seem to have lost half their coral, you need to point out, like, well, this article also says blah 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 blah. What does the articles that you found add to our larger conversation? So go ahead and do that now. What I want you to do is point that out and then provide those links in the box at the right. And the last thing I want you to do is on your phone, whether it's an iPhone or an Android. I know Android has the app available too, but I just know that on an iPhone it's called voice memos. I want you to just read for 1 minute out loud, recording one of the articles. So choose one of the 2 articles. It doesn't matter to me which one. Hit record on your voice memos on your phone, and so it's recording you reading out loud, and then you will send that to my email, which is nathaniel.doimer@ist728.org. It should populate when you start typing it in, or if you are in the classroom, it is on the board at the very top of the whiteboard there. So once you finish that, you have finished your assignment for the week. Very last thing I'll have you do is rate yourself on the scale of 1 to 4 that we started with in the video. Thank you and have a good day.